Hey guys, how are we doing? Crypto Insight UK here, bringing you back another video. So I'm going to spend today's video talking about when alt season and what we're looking for to see the start of alt season. So just before we get into this and as we go, I'm going to just talk about the macro to start with. And I talk about that just because I'm just trying to set the scene for what I think could be a push up into summer and in towards the end of this year. Obviously, we're in May now. And to be honest, I thought this might come earlier than it has, but obviously with Trump and narratives, tariffs, whatever you want to call them, different narratives, obviously. Not just tariffs, there's a lot going on. Tariffs is just in the media right now. Before that, obviously we had inflation scares and all this sort of stuff before Trump came in, etc. But and wars, obviously, in the Middle East. And there's always going to be new narratives that are going to affect what may or may not happen in the short term. But what we can see technically is that at some point soon, and soon could be weeks, but also could be months, but also could be days, we should see, and I think we will see, a rotation from Bitcoin percentage-wise into altcoins. People always come with the argument, oh, but what about the institutions who are buying Bitcoin, never going to sell it, whatever. That's a fair argument, and to be honest, we have no historical proof of whether what I'm about to say is going to be accurate or not. But everyone who held Bitcoin before the institutions is still going to have made a lot of money on that Bitcoin and should still follow the same risk profiling as they have in previous cycles if they've been here for more than one cycle. So anyone who bought basically the last few weeks or this cycle generally, I'm not talking about institutions here, but everybody else who made the market what it was in the last 2 or 3 cycles will have still been positively affected by institutions buying their bags, and they will probably look down the risk curve to multiply their rewards, and that's how alt seasons happen. Okay, that's my opinion. I think there's no difference between whether institutions hold Bitcoin or not. Maybe for next cycle or the cycle after, but at this point, no difference. It's just basically like new holders coming in who are buying Bitcoin and not wanting to sell their bag, but the old holders will still have had the price appreciation. That's my thought process. Could be wrong. So we discussed, this is ETH. I'm going to get onto ETH in a second because it does compare to what I want to discuss there. Let me just talk about Bitcoin quickly first and liquidity. This is something we've been discussing. I talked about this in the weekly newsletter, so go and subscribe to that if you don't already. It's completely free. Let's just get rid of these drawings. What I discussed is that Bitcoin, pretty much at the same time last year, March, and then it does break out in September, but I actually do think we probably go earlier than this time. But from March to November-ish, we ranged. And this time for Bitcoin, it's pretty much from November. This is why I think it goes earlier, because we've actually started the range earlier. But from November to so far May, we've been ranging. And if we follow the exact amount of time from the peak to the breakout, 239 days. And you can call this the peak or this, but let's go from here. Where would 239 days? I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same, because I don't think it will be. I actually think we go faster than this. But let's say 239 days will take us out into July. So it's possible. It's not the exact time frame that I think we're going to play by. I also think we're further into it. I think we're here. So I do think, look, as you can see, it's a condensed time frame. But what we can see is a prolonged range after a move up. And then we can see 2 pools of liquidity, one here and one here, that we squeeze through, and then price continues higher. So what's happened here, we've got this range. We've got 2 pools of liquidity, one here and one here, which I think at some point we're going to squeeze through and price is going to go significantly higher. And if we use percentages above the 2 pools, so let's go just to the green section of the liquidity, look, and we'll use the same in a second here, where I'll just show you where price goes to top, 24% higher than where the liquidity comes in. And we'll go again from the green section to the top. This could give us a bit of an indication of where the high could come in. 24% will bring us to about $160,000 Bitcoin. Now that's in my price target of around 180 is where I think the cycle top is going to come in. So if we get this move for Bitcoin here, I do think this will be the time, or maybe this happens first. Maybe we start to push through here, and then and alts take a back seat while Bitcoin does that, and then alts rally as Bitcoin just blows off top to the high and alts rally here. But I honestly do think alts probably start to rally as Bitcoin breaks the top of this range. So let me show you where I think alts will probably start to go. Anywhere in this area here is my guess. If we start to break, that's an awful drawing. Let me just do a square because I'm actually so bad at freehand drawing. Anywhere from here to probably about here, if this is going to be the break, if we get up to about 104,000 and we start to continue higher, this is where I think we'll see the start of the rotation into alts. Why do I say that? Well, that's because at this point here, this is where we saw the XRP move. We talked about this yesterday. It's where XRP started, and then XRP really started to outperform as Bitcoin pushed up here, percentage-wise. Looking at the Bitcoin dominance chart, what we can see is to basically the reason I've talked about Bitcoin price first is because what I'm saying is it doesn't mean that the whole of Bitcoin market cap is topped and that's just what's going to rotate into alts. I don't actually think that. I think we're going to have a more explosive alt season than most think, because I think Bitcoin price is going to rally and it's going to lose dominance. So that means that loads of capital is going to be flowing through the crypto market at this point. And that's why I talked about the macro a little bit first, because I think I'm going to touch on a few macro points here. But macro, I think, and follow my X, because on X I've been laying the foundation for this today and then hopefully like topping that up with this video. But watching Andreas Larsen this morning, we're talking about tariffs potentially not being as bad as people think, in the terms of basically the economy has not come down as low as people think. Financial institutions are not in the market as much as they should be based on this thought. The dollar's down, which means basically it's good for other economies. It means they can spend more and stimulate more without weakening their currency. Oil's down, which means that inflation is probably down and people have more energy for production. It's normally coincides with like a low in price action, in my opinion, when oil's down, because the more oil gets used, the higher the price of it goes. Obviously, the supply and demand dynamic here as well, but the more oil gets used, the higher the price of it goes, and probably the further into like a boom bust cycle you were in, because if the price is high, it's being used more, and if the price is low, it's being used less, and so there's more opportunity for it to be used going forwards. Also, we're seeing the reprieval of political pressure on Jerome Powell, so maybe they've come to some sort of deal with Trump. I don't know, that's speculation, but he's got a talk this Wednesday, so let's look at those things. And one last macro thing, and then we'll get back into Bitcoin dominance. So we talked about the DXY. Look, this doesn't mean that DXY can't bounce short term. I think maybe it does, but I do think we probably continue lower over time. We've talked about this 11-week lagging effect for Bitcoin. I've said we've probably only had this candle, which would mean we've got 2 weeks of shopping about before we then continue and then start to see some more aggressive movement, which would probably coincide with what I'm thinking. And the last thing I want to touch on in the macro is gold. Gold is going parabolic. There's no other way to really talk about it. We're oversold in the weekly after seeing a 3 drive. Weekly RSI, the stochastic RSIs are also oversold. If we look at the monthly time frame, it's literally just a straight line up essentially. And the last sort of time we saw this aggressive a move up was probably here, I'd say in the 80s, with a significant pullback there, at least in the short. And look at where the RSI is. It's massively, again, overbought. I mean, not oversold if I said that. But what I would look at here for gold is, I think that we'll pull back into probably the 280 sort of period, like maybe this area here. Maybe just retest this. And although that like this sort of area potentially, which is quite a significant pullback from where we are right now, especially today, we've continued higher. It's like a 20% pullback, 18 to 25% pullback for gold, which is a lot of capital, seeing as the market cap of gold is now 20 trillion. That's like 4 trillion to 6 trillion-ish in terms of capital being pulled just out of gold that could potentially then rotate into crypto. So that's why I've just laid this background. So then looking at Bitcoin dominance, where I'm going to go back to now. Again, does it mean today? Does it mean tomorrow? Does it mean in a few weeks? I really don't know. But Bitcoin dominance is approaching the level where previous alt seasons have started. If we look at this tiny little circle here, it's what we talked about yesterday. This circle here is where we saw the XRP outperformance. XRP in this tiny circle went from 55 cents to topping at 330, but ultimately in a short space of time to $2.70. That's just one large cap altcoin. I think that trend is going to ring true across most altcoins that have maybe some either attention-based utility, and I say attention-based, meaning that people can draw a lot of attention there. So things like SUI, low float, high FDV, meaning that there's not a lot of supply, but if the demand gets high, then the price can squeeze high. So that's one example of tokens like that. The others are like ENA, which I've been buying, and it's actually down on my position at the minute. But I think large caps will do well. I think XRP will probably continue to outperform. But I also do think ETH is indicating to us that it's going to go to at least all-time highs here. Because if we just look on the daily time frame, is this daily? Yeah. If we look on the daily time frame, there's significant liquidity on ETH up at about $4,200. So I think that's telling us, right, at some point we're going to see $4,200 ETH this cycle. Everyone's probably positioned short. You can see that because the leverage is all up here. With the stop losses up here, they've held from the top, and people get greedy on shorts. They've been doubling down. They've been pushing it more leverage and more leverage. And at some point, it probably reverses. And where that point is probably between 65% and 74% dominance of Bitcoin, so long as history repeats. And if history does repeat, and we do see these inflows, it should be a substantial alt season because we've got a shitload more capital in the markets right now that is mainly in Bitcoin, as you can provably see here. Another thing that I've been watching is ETH versus ETH dominance, ETH.D, and I'm relying, or not relying, but I'm looking at ETH a lot here because at the minute it's the largest altcoin. What you can see on ETH dominance is we've actually swept our previous lows, and we are the most oversold that we have been ever in weekly RSI and stochastic RSI, with a bit of a bullish divergence here as we set lower lows, but stochastic RSI sets an equal low and then now is trying to break out the oversold area back into a more neutral territory, indicating that some momentum might be coming back for the ETH dominance chart, which says to me that, okay, ETH is going to take up some market share. And if ETH starts to take some market share, Bitcoin statistically should lose some unless ETH just eats everything else. And if it does, then it will probably rotate from there. Normally it's into the larger caps and then the smaller caps. That's what we've seen historically. The thing that I really want to stress here, though, is not to get like too obsessed with specific altcoins, because they probably will all go in this time, and it's just about trying to guess which alts do the best throughout this cycle. I personally believe the leaders like XRP, like SUI, and others. I say SUI not because I think technically it's the best crypto. I say it because it's got a lot of hype behind it, and it also has a low supply. I think it'll do badly, really badly in the bear, and I think it'll probably, as long as attention can keep up for it, it'll do well. Whereas XRP, I think, can probably continue to outperform as a large cap and then probably find a much higher low than we saw in the previous bear market, which I also do think will come at some point. But whether the length of markets have changed or not, you could probably argue that they have. As let's go from low to low, for example, here, 1,169 days, and if we go, say, from low to low, like let's say the low comes in here, or maybe the length of the cycles haven't changed, but I guess that this area could have been argued to be the low. Let's just say that's. Let's go from crash to crash, 1,600. We're on 1,400 days already, so slightly extended, unless the markets have been extended a little bit. I don't know whether we can argue whether the 4-year cycle has ended or not. People often ask me that question. I always say that I honestly don't. I think it's too early to tell whether the 4-year cycle has ended. You could be 5 years, and you could say, 4 years normally revolves around Bitcoin mining. But if we get a fast catch up, for example, if we see Bitcoin dominance do this, where's my pen? Great. Can you find that when I need that? I don't know what I'm doing here. Here we go. If we see Bitcoin dominance just go like this and just absolutely nuke it down, then you could almost say, okay, maybe the 4-year cycle continues. But I do think it probably goes to like this. But I do also think that it will be much faster of a move down than this slow chop up. So they're all my thoughts. And as I said yesterday on yesterday's video, I do think we breach below the 39% level for Bitcoin dominance, because I think this is a downtrend. I think we're down. I think we're ranging. And then I think we continue down. That's honestly what I think, and I'm going to show you what the US dollar looks like, just to give you an example of why I think this. And the US dollar hasn't completely played this out yet, but it's kind of similar, at least right now. Bitcoin dominance comes down and we range. And yes, it does sweep the highs here. So maybe Bitcoin dominance does that. And then I think it comes down. That's basically what I think is happening here. So it's swept the highs and now currently has swept the lows. So maybe Bitcoin dominance only just sweeps the lows. I don't know. But I do presume that the US dollar comes down to at least 95. And if not, just below 90. So all of these things are basically setting me up to say, at some point in the near future, whether that's a few weeks or a few months, the macro and crypto is telling us that crypto should probably break out. And during this breakout, when we get the breakout of the range, so I'm going to show you the exact price that I think where things really start to kick off for alts. And when we get this price, we can reassess, and you can call me an idiot if I'm wrong. And until then, like shut your mouth, basically, it's just chop. This price here, we start to break this range, 100,000 to 100, oh, is that 106,000? 107,000 to 111,000. When we start to see those price targets, which I think are inevitable, 107 to 111,000 is where I think Bitcoin probably starts to lose dominance and alts start to go crazy. And then you've basically got from this time here, until wherever we top out, which, as I said, could be 30% higher than this green box, which, what were we saying, like 160k. So you've got this area here where altcoins will do very well, in my opinion. That's the area. And yes, it could go higher. We could overextend. Normally on these parabolic blow-off tops, we do overextend. It could come all the way up to, I've been targeting 180k, but could go higher to like 200s. And if we have that, then we're going to have a flipping explosive alt season, and we're literally going to the moon, as this looks like here. But that's basically what I'm looking for this cycle. It's what I think is coming, and when I think it's coming in terms of price action. In terms of time, I don't know, but as I've said, I think the macro is building up right now for this to be happening in the next 2 months. I think we should be breaking this range and seeing these alts really outperform. I haven't moved anything from my XRP bag. I haven't cycled anything into ETH. I think the XRP risk to reward is still higher than that of ETH, but I do think ETH looks like it's a very good value range for people looking to make a more safe play here. But you're probably only looking at max 200-300% from here for ETH, whereas XRP you could be looking higher than that, in my opinion, if we have a good run. So with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and let me know in the comments. Share it with a friend and do subscribe. That would really help me out, and it's free to do. Peace up, A-Town Downs, Crypto Insight UK would say.